probably agree on.
Yeah, the playoff team for sure.
So do you.
I mean, I tell you what, I don't think there was a more accurate state. And
if they struggle again, I mean, I don't think there's any way you can keep Alex Critch. But
hey guys, I'm Bud Elliott. That's Mitch Wolfe of Eagle Insider. That means we're talking Boston College today. Mitch, welcome back to summer school, man.
Very excited to be back. You know, obviously, summer school is something you don't want to repeat, but very excited to be back and talking with you about BC after one of the more tumultuous off seasons in program history.
I read all your coverage, and this has been a wild ride that BC has been on. For those who don't know, Jeff Hafley left for the NFL, and BC, I gotta say, I think they did a pretty damn good job here to bring in Bill O'Brien, who was very good at Penn State, pretty good actually, I thought, in the NFL, at least as a coach, maybe not as a GM, and then was the OC at Alabama. What were your initial thoughts on the hire of Bill O'Brien?
Well, obviously, the Hafley thing comes up, and it's kind of out of the blue, and everybody's very surprised. And you start hearing these rumblings about Bill O'Brien, and as a BC fan, you just think, "There's no way that's going to happen. Like that's too good to be true." Like he just took the offensive coordinator position at Ohio State. Like he's from the area, his wife's from the area. So I think his wife went to BC. Like he's got connection, but there's no way. Like that's crazy. And then it happened, and we were like, "Oh wow, we really did it." And frankly, with how the timeline of that, and honestly, the New England Patriots moving on from Bill Belichick, which allowed them to take some guys from the Patriots, including Burj Najarian, who has been basically Bill Belichick's consigliere for since he was with the Jets in the mid 90s and kind of been his behind the scenes fixer, and him coming to BC, which is huge. That was just the biggest coup that really BC could imagine. They kind of just fell bass backwards into it.
Awesome. In what areas do you expect Boston College to look like the most different this coming year, obviously with complete turnover on both sides of the ball?
I think on offense, the easy answer is the drop back passing game. Last year they put in Thomas Castellanos, and at times they're kind of just running this funky, almost single wing offense where they've got 7 offensive linemen on the field. They've got 2 tight ends, a fullback, and they're just having him run Q power. I don't think they're going to. I think you could see a little bit of that this year, but not. I think you're going to see a much more diverse professional drop back passing game because that's what Bill O'Brien does. Obviously Thomas Castellanos is going to operate out of the shotgun on the vast majority, if not all the snaps, just because of that's what he's used to, given the fact that he's listed at 5'10". That's just where he's more comfortable. So that won't change too much, but I think you'll see a little less QB running. And that was evident in the spring game where when Thomas Castellanos was on the field, you could kind of tell that Bill O'Brien was having a quicker whistle with him you got to get the ball, you got to read the play. And Castellanos, to his credit, was trying his best to what I would describe as ace the test, make the big throw, that make the concept that was on the play. Whereas with the backup, Grayson James is transferred from FIU, comes in, they're giving him a little more time, letting him scramble a little more. He's checking down a lot more. So I felt he was trying to just pass the test. So, a lot of fans were like, oh my gosh, Grayson James blew up the spring game. He had a higher than 60% completion percentage for all that matters in the spring game. But when they went down towards the end of the spring game and did, situation football, they said, oh, this is a 2-minute situation. You got no timeouts. Castellanos had some really electric plays, especially throwing the ball, whereas Grayson James was check down, sack, interception. So that's kind of, and so there's rumblings of the quarterback controversy, but I don't put too much stock behind them.
Do you think a drop back passing game with Thomas Castellanos is the way to go, or is it more like Bill O'Brien is, hey, this is what I'm going to run. Let's get everybody indoctrinated into my system. Like did you see enough from him as a passer last year to think this is going to be effective?
Enough to maybe not effective, or maybe just not enough, but there were flashes, and a good amount of flashes where he's not, and obviously his best trait is his ability to run and make these crazy out of structure plays. But I thought that his ability to actually win in structure in the passing game was a little underrated. He can actually throw over the middle, which is surprising for a guy of his stature. And he has a pretty decent arm for a guy his size, and obviously can use it well on the run. I think there's going to be some hiccups early in the season, obviously, and they've got they've got a tougher schedule this season, no doubt. Especially with the start, you got Florida State, then Duquesne, it is what it is, FCS, and then Missouri. So some tough opponents there. I think both Missouri and Florida State are on the road as well. So I don't expect those 2 games to go well, especially with how much they're changing the offense, but. Once we get into the middle season, get into some ACC opponents, I think he'll start to settle down and fit better in the offense.
in a weird way, having Florida State or a Missouri on the road, it's not great, obviously, for the chance to win that ball game. But I was thinking about this with some other schools this morning. Like Auburn has to go, to Georgia.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, but that means you're not blowing a home game, a winnable home
Yes.
game opportunity,
Mhm.
right? Like if you play Florida State on the road, and I think you have with Virginia Tech on the road, I believe as well. That's
Yeah.
a fairly tough game. That means you probably have 4 fairly winnable conference home games for BC, right?
Yeah, they've got a funky stretch in the middle of October. They have to play at Virginia Tech, then home against Louisville, and I think both of them might be night games on short weeks. But then those 2 games are sandwiched in between 2 byes, which is kind of a very weird anachronism of the schedule.
It is an odd schedule this year, especially with Cal and Stanford and all them coming in. So passing game, Lewis Bond, and then the 2 transfers, I assume, or more tight end usage. What are you feeling there?
So I definitely think Jerron Bradley, the transfer from Texas Tech, is going to be a big part of this offense. He went to high school with Grayson James, the backup for a hot second in Texas, and then but yeah, really like Lewis Bond. Not going to be as much of the downfield receiver, but great run off the catch, good contested catch ability over the middle. Bradley's going to be your traditional X, 6'4", 6'5", 220. Has one of the weirder stances I've seen from a receiver just because of how crazy long his legs are. But yeah, big expectations for him. Then after that, a lot of bodies that are interesting and can be effective number threes. The one that I'm kind of expecting to be the Z, if you will, if Bond is going to be in the slot as the F, is Jaden Skeet, who was a true freshman last year, got in the game a lot towards the end of the year. Had some impressive catches in the bowl game over the middle, and has had a crazy one-handed catch against UConn too. So he's a guy that I think is going to be that Z. And then behind them, you got Jaden McGowan, the transfer from Vanderbilt, who crazy speed, really good kick returner. Not sure how consistent he's going to be as a receiver, but I think they can find fun ways to use him. I've got Dino Tomlin, Mike Tomlin's son, who can play inside, outside, very tough receiver, run off the catch. Not super great vertical, but he always seems to come up with a big play when they need it. And Reed Harris is going to be the backup X with Joseph Griffin Jr. transferring to Wisconsin. And he got in the game a good bit last year. He's kind of a hybrid tight end. He's 6'4", 210. I think he's going to be more of a traditional receiver now. And learning behind Bradley, I think will be very helpful for him. And he could work his way into getting some playing time.
Nice. Okay. Offensive line wise, they lost their 2 best guards, and they didn't take anybody in the portal. Is that a most of the offensive linemen in the portal kind of suck type reflection, or is it like we like what we have on the roster, or maybe some of both? Or
I would say it's a little bit of both, and I've tried to explain this to our fans on the message board that it's not going to be easy to replace 2 NFL guards who are all ACC players. You're just not going to get better, especially in the portal. And I think they in the early part of the portal when Hafley was still around, they were looking for some replacements. But with the guys they have on the roster, it's kind of hard to say like, oh yeah, this guy is for sure better. And some of the guys they're younger, they want to see. One way they're ameliorating this is that they're moving Logan Taylor, their left tackle from last year, inside to left guard, and starting Jude Bowery at left tackle, who has played a bit here and there over the last 2 years, has had some injury issues, but they really like his skill set. His footwork is incredible. He's a really, really good athlete. So I think they want to get him out as playing a tackle, get him some reps going. And then right guard, it's kind of just still going to be a battle probably up until week 1. Jack Conley and Kevin Klein are both actually, and Dwayne Halleck are all 3. I think they're all redshirt seniors or graduate students who have been around a long time. Conley and Klein are huge. They don't move that well, and they had some technique issues, but you hope that a whole season of battling for that position, it'll yield some result. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, they do have a guy, Jack Funk, who's worked at a lot of positions on the offensive line. And if they say, okay, if none of these guys work, we can try Funk because he's a younger guy and maybe he's the guy for the future.
Certainly better depth than they've had in a few years, at least. The 1 year, was it 21 or 22?
22 was the dark times.
Yeah, there's been a few teams in this league over the course of, I've covered it for, since 07. So longer than I want to admit. But like the one Wake year when Clausen was playing like 3 walk-ons and like 2 true freshmen was not really, it was a 2013 or 2014. And then like the one Florida State year where they had 2 guys got in the preseason, it was like, there's no hope here.
That's we're hoping. And a lot of the guys that actually were there that year are still around. Like Conley started I think he started every game that year. He started 3 different positions. Dwayne Alec, who's a backup, started I think every game that year, most of them at guard. Kevin Klein was the week 1 start at right tackle, but suffered a season-ending injury week 2, and he played a little bit of guard last year. So now these guys are basically, instead of being the guy, now they're kind of the quote unquote weak link, but they're surrounded by better guys who are going to be better players. And they're older. And in case of Conley and Klein, they're bigger than almost anybody they're going to face. So you hope that just kind of that size and maturity is like, okay, maybe they can beat up on some 19-year-olds.
Flipping to the other side here, I mean, the defensive front returns like everybody.
Yep, pretty much.
That's got to be pretty encouraging for a unit that had I don't know, not great surface level stuff, but I read your stuff and it felt like their pass rush at times was better than maybe some of their surface level sack numbers. And now they're all back and a year older.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact rank, but I think they basically had a 33 or something % pressure rate, which ranked in the 30s or like 39th. So it's the pressure rate wasn't the issue. It's just the fact that they had the fewest sacks or tied for fewest sacks among Power 5 teams. And I think it was also the second worst among all teams. So it's just a bad luck year with, QB hits or penalties or what have you, or quarterbacks just getting the ball out. So, you hope that regresses back to the mean this year. I think they're really hoping that Nito Ikpala can take a step as a senior to help take some of the pressure off Donovan Ezraku, so teams aren't just sliding their protection towards him and double teaming him every play. But yeah, I mean, they lost Chris Banks, who was a rotational defensive tackle, and Vinny DePalma, who was their middle linebacker, who they took off the field on passing downs anyways. So bring in Ced McConnell, who's a kind of a rotational defensive tackle from Illinois. And then I'm a little concerned about the edge depth, but Edwin Kalingi has flashed pretty positively. Gilbert Tongrangu has had some moments, and they've got some young guys there that impressed in the spring, but it was against backups in the spring game, so it's kind of hard to gauge. Are they really going to be impact ACC players?
I will say, if you, in hindsight, look at the schedule, the lack of sacks relative to pressure, like the Holy Cross kid was very mobile at quarterback, and he's now an FBS transfer. Mm-hmm. Florida State had Jordan Travis, right? Now Louisville can't help you out there. That kid was not mobile, but
I mean half their sacks came against Virginia, literally. So
our Army's a triple option team. Haynes King of Georgia Tech is extremely mobile.
He killed him on the ground in the game, and that really surprised me. I didn't know he had wheels like that.
UConn
it was Roberson that game.
Okay, yeah. So it's basically a glorified running back,
and they moved the pocket a lot with him. There was a few plays where they had him dead to rights, and he just got rid of the ball at the very last second. So a lot of it was just like bad luck. And
Syracuse played a tight end for a quarterback for a lot of the second, or like the final.
That was the Carlos Del Rio Wilson.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So they got to him a few times, and then Tech drones really hurt
very
them.
Sack.
Yeah. Pitt, they got bad luck there with some last second throwaways. Miami, Van Dyke actually had some nice ability to get out of the pocket. And SMU is just tough to pass rush because of how bad the field was.
Yeah, exactly. I think I think you're on to something here, dude. As far, I mean, obviously, the team.
I mean, it's just that it's such a historical outlier of lack of sacks. It's like this is, even if it's below average, it's gonna be better. It naturally has to be better.
It's like a pitcher that has a crazy swing strike rate and like low on strikeouts.
And they get Virginia again, and I don't think that their offensive line is much better. So.
Yeah, they're not a school academically that can take a lot of good transfers typically. So, linebacker, like DePalma is gone. He was solid, but not like amazing, I guess. Jones has gone to the draft.
The biggest question with DePalma is just losing the guy who's the mental, physical, like emotional leader for the defense. The guy who's been around, has seen everything. And then obviously they took him off the field a good bit on passing downs against faster teams, but he was still there. He made a bunch of key stops on fourth downs just because of knowing where to be. But there were other times where he knew where to be and just couldn't get there. Got shook at the tackle at the point of attack, sometimes just by more athletic players. So I'm not exactly sure how they're going to do this, but I imagine Cam Arnold, he's going to his 5th year as a starter, basically. 4th year as a starter. He's been here 5 years because he played at safety in the COVID year. You're hoping that he kind of steps into that because he's been around for a while. And then you're getting guys like Bryce Steele back from some medical issues, and Davian Crouch, who impressed a lot towards the end of the year, who has pretty much just played on special teams, but he's been good when he's on defense, so they're going to use him a good bit more. And Sione Hala, who's a former high 4-star recruit that is a bit light in the pants, is another former safety, but Guy can run and plays much bigger than his listed size. So they've got some guys that are interesting there, but they're guys who we haven't seen play a ton, so it's just hard to predict and really rely on them based on the lack of film.
It'll be pretty important for the secondary to gel, ahead of schedule, as you
Yes.
noted. I mean,
Yes.
leading off against Florida State, at Missouri, Michigan State, the Childs kid at quarterback is I think really, really talented.
Mhm.
Western Kentucky, it's a CUSA team, but they do chuck it around fairly
Mhm.
well. One that you got to pay attention to at least nominally.
Mhm.
What are your biggest concerns for this defense?
I think I guess the corners outside of Amari Jackson. Amari Jackson has had some really good games, had one of the most insane pick sixes I've seen against Georgia Tech. Has had some really good reps, but then down the end of the stretch when Jones was suspended and he had to cover number one receivers, he had some issues, struggled a bit against Miami, got beat a few times against SMU. So I'm hoping that, a year removed, he's just because that was his first year as a starter, really. A year older, hopefully he's just kind of going to continue developing, getting Ray Brown over from Washington State, who's been a pretty good developer of talent there. Hopefully he can kind of take Amari Jackson to the next level. Across from him, looks like Max Tucker is going to start, who played a decent bit as a true freshman last year and had a few really good games, had a few really bad games. So, hopefully that he develops as a true sophomore. Behind them, they got two transfers. One, Bryquise Brown from Georgia State, brother of Bruce Brown. He was a player for the Nuggets. He might be with the Pacers now.
Okay.
He has played a good bit in the Sun Belt at Georgia State. I thought he was pretty good against everybody except Malik Neighbors, and everybody sucked against Malik Neighbors.
Yeah.
So it's hard to hold it against him too much. And then Ryan Turner is a transfer from Ohio State who, 4-star recruit just couldn't get on the field there, which again, hard to hold against him because it's just, maybe he can't play at Ohio State, probably can play decently at BC. So it looks like he might be in the slot, but they've had some injuries there in secondary, nothing major, just nicks and bruises. So it's kind of hard to see who's exactly going to play there. And they're still waiting on Cam Martinez, who's a transfer from Ohio State, kind of a safety slot hybrid that was originally recruited by Hafley, decided to transfer, but had to stay at Ohio State to finish his degree. Then Hafley leaves. He's still coming here, but until he enrolls, we're still, holding our breath.
I'm a big believer in the theory that guys who transfer to reunite with a coach who worked with them before, they may not have an amazing ceiling, but the floor is generally pretty bankable.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I wonder if that applies here to Bill O'Brien. He was a very, very extremely briefly at Ohio State, but the fact that he got
I
hired
believe
at
both
Ohio
of those
State,
guys transferred before he decided to
that
come
makes
over.
sense.
So,
But Hafley is also really you got to think guys that come from Ohio State, either whether under Jeff or under Bill, both there's no real competition for players between those staffs. So I got to think it's somewhat symbiotic. Hey, can this guy play at this Boston College level?
Yeah.
That'd make a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Who has to step up big time for this team to comfortably make a bowl?
I think you need Thomas Castellanos to take that step to show that he can be a consistent pocket passer because, like I said, there were flashes. Obviously it was kind of a weird game script against Louisville, but he had some really incredible plays there. And there was an injury in the middle of the season which he was dealing with, and I believe it was his non-throwing shoulder, but it seemed to affect his ability to throw the ball accurately. And obviously it was his first year as a starter in a real offense, transferring. So we gave him a little bit of a grace period, and obviously he was still electric as a runner. So he always brings that. And this was something we talked about with him and Grayson James, the backup, is that Grayson James is probably a better fit for what Bill O'Brien wants to do on a snap to snap basis in terms of just traditional drop back game. But because of Thomas Castellanos' ability as a runner, and also I think just his charisma and leadership is something that when I went to the bowl game, I saw it up close. There's just something different about him that is okay, this guy can elevate the rest of his teammates. And we saw Ryan O'Keefe last year follow him from UCF. We saw running back Jordan McDonald follow him from UCF. This guy just has something that people rally behind. So you kind of just have to go with that. Even when he's going to make some bad interceptions, he's going to stare down a receiver and stare down a defender and throw it right to him. It'll happen once in a while. You just hope you can mitigate it and hope O'Brien and the rest of the coaching staff can kind of work with him on that and he can continue developing. So on the offense, definitely him. On the defense, it's hard to pick out one player, I would say. I think you kind of just hope that Donovan Ezraku gets back to the 2022 form, where I think he had 8.5 sacks and might have had double-digit tackle for losses, but I can't remember the exact number. But he's still a very good player, excellent run defender, especially for his size. You just want to see him be more productive in the stat sheet.
Awesome. Mitch Wolfe, Eagle Insider. Mitch, I just, man, great job as always, dude. I don't think there's any better place to go for Boston College coverage. So this is awesome.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much for having me again.